you said something that's quite fundamental that you often talk to patients about is that there are good bits, there's a good side to the bits that you are afraid of, and the dark side to what you pride yourself on. And I love that because I feel it encapsulates so much, but I wonder if you could expand a bit on that for people who might not be aware.
Yes, well, starting from the most concrete level, you get people who come, and what they're reporting is that, they have enormously good intentions. And as a result, they feel they need to take care of their family. But their concept of care is, perfectly understandably, that they must protect them from anything that might be harmful, and they must control them as much as possible in the path towards what is beneficial. And what they experience is that not only does this not happen, but that there are tensions and resentments in the family, and that this person who believes that she's being a wonderful mother is actually producing something which is contrary to what she thought. And so helping her or him to see what it is that is happening, and that some of the things that seem good are bound up with things that are not, and vice versa, is quite important. One of the most toxic ideas is that of perfection, and it's often said that our culture somehow elevates, and I understand what's meant by that through advertising and so forth, an ideal of perfection. And I think it's a very important thing to see the dark side too. I say that the problem with perfection is that it is highly imperfect. It has many, many flaws. And it's a great problem, because people would come to me and say, very common thing people would say is, my life feels out of control. And I say, well, in a kind way, well, join the club. I think you'll find that a lot of people feel that, and for a very good reason, which is that there are very few, almost vanishingly few things in life of any importance that you can really control. And when you come to think about it, you've tried to control things and you found that you can't control them. That's not because there's a fault in you. That's because this idea may not be a good one. And so helping people to accept the idea that life is not a series of problems to which perfect answers must be found, but that it is a flow, again, coming back to Taoism and to Heraclitus, talking about the river as this ever-changing but ever the same flow of experience. The idea with a flow, like the crest of the wave, is that you find yourself moving with it, not trying to resist it, because you waste your energy trying to resist it. I mean, this is, if you are a Buddhist, then you know very well that this is central to that kind of thinking. So at that level, it's practically the case, but I think at a really rather profound social level, we're in the grip of this as a grave malaise. So much talk about social problems now is generated by often, and nothing wrong with young people having vehement opinions, that's part of being young. But the problem is we've lost confidence in saying, okay, yeah, but actually it's a little bit more complicated than that. And so there are lots of people mouthing extremely black and white opinions, very aggressively, arrogantly, one might say, and refusing to hear anything else. Now, there's a lovely story, you possibly know it, but I think all psychiatrists should, a Chinese story about the man who loses his horse. Do you know about this?
Yes, it's the Zen, it's kind of a Zen parable. Tell it, yes.
Yes. So in short, a farmer, one day loses his horse, and all his neighbors say, oh, what bad luck. And he says, well, bad luck, good luck, who knows? And the next day, his horse comes back with another horse that it found on the hillside. And people say, oh, what good luck. And he said, well, good luck, bad luck, who knows? The next day, his son tries to break in the horse, falls off and breaks his leg. And people say, oh, what bad luck. And he says, well, bad luck, good luck, who knows? The next day, the emperor's soldiers come to the village and recruit all the able-bodied young men and take them away to war. And his son is excused because he has a broken leg. And he will say, well, what good luck, you get the point. So we don't really know what the consequences of anything may be, except again in the very short term. If you take a very simplistic view and a very crude idea of causation, then you think this must be good. And if it's a little of it is good, more and more and more of it may be good. But everything has its good side and its bad side.
Yeah.
And if you push things far enough, life is not linear. I mean, this image of the straight line is a terrific impediment. In fact, the Austrian painter and architect Friedrich Hundertswasser called the straight line the downfall of mankind. But instead, when you push, and this again, I remember thinking in my teens, when you go far enough one way, it's not that you go away from what you fear, you end up right back there. So for example, extreme left positions in politics are very like extreme right positions. And actually, interestingly, I always say about religious matters that the divide is not between, quote, theists and, quote, atheists. It's between fundamentalist theists and fundamentalist atheists on the one hand, and the rest of people who take a sort of nuanced, adult, exploring view that we know little, that we see something there, we don't know what it is, we can't dismiss it, can't say what it is. Now, probably 90% of mankind actually fall into that category, those who call themselves agnostics, atheists, or believers. It's the problematic people are the ones who know they are right.
who are possessed by certainty. And an interesting, and I don't know if you know the writer Douglas Murray, but a point he makes, which is quite interesting, is that when talking about social and political situations, people often talk as though that they're at the end point of history, that, you know, everything that's happened has happened, and now we're at the finishing line. And, you know, and we can locate all the badness, as it were, either in the half of society that we disagree with, or with all of the people that came before us. They were bad. They couldn't see the forest for the trees, and now we've figured it out, and now we're here at the utopia, or we'll be at the utopia very, very shortly. And it's such a trap to fall into.
Yes. And once again, we come to the idea of the straight line. This is very new. I mean, traditionally, societies have always seen time in terms of circles or helixes, where I like the helix better than the circle, which suggests you come back where you were. But the idea of the helix is that as you ascend the spiral, you come back almost to where you were, but you're now at a slightly different level, and you can see something of where you were before. But that you are generally moving in this way in which you cannot avoid opposites. Mm-hmm. But the notion of linear progress is one that no intelligent person in the past would ever have thought. Even the Greeks and the Romans, who had great empires, they knew perfectly well that they are for a time, and that they don't have all the answers. What causes the downfall of any society and the downfall of a person is the belief that we now know. It's what the Greeks call hubris, and it led to what they called catastrophe. Catastrophe literally means downfall. And the great Greek tragedies are all about the theme of somebody who was great and thought he knew everything, and that caused the downfall. And it's I mean, you know something in psychology called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which shows that people who know very little think they know everything. And even when it's demonstrated to them that they've clearly got it wrong compared with other people, that doesn't shake their belief that they're wrong. They believe very strongly they're right. People who however, who know a lot are aware of what it is they don't know, and therefore are much more circumspect.
And what you said about sort of the myth of linear progress, you know, it's hard to overstate just how baked into our biology that is. It might seem crude to use a gym analogy at this point, but even if anyone who lifts weights to get stronger knows that it's not just a question of, you can't just continue going for sessions and lifting more and more weight and progressing linearly. You have to do so in cycles. So you'll build up for a point, then allow fatigue to drop, allow your muscles to rest and recover. And there are cycles within cycles within cycles. There's a microcycle. So you train one day, you rest the day after. Then there's what's called a mesocycle, where you train for a week, then you train in blocks of a month, and then you have rest periods between all of those different cycles. So it's quite fascinating just to see how far down this goes.
Yes, and as you can imagine, I'm afraid you've just educated me on mesocycles. I didn't know about this, but what I do know about, and it brings us back to the plight of somebody in training nowadays as a psychiatrist, is that it's also very obvious from the history of people who have made breakthroughs in ideas that they need to do a lot of hard work that at the time seems to be going nowhere. And then they need to have a fallow period in which their attention is directed somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Because the Gorgon snare of constantly trying to solve this problem means that you narrow down, literally, your attention so that you don't actually allow the bigger picture to grow.
You are listening to a Maudsley Learning Podcast.